Well, hello, everybody. My name is Mark Schneider, and I want to welcome you to episode 166 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including the increasing infringement of parental rights in the name of sex and gender theory. Now, this is a subject that we at POK keep coming back to, number one, because these violations are so egregious. But number two, far from going away, they are increasing, as witnessed by California Assembly Bill 1955, a reaction against sensibly run school districts that oppose what we at POK called parental secrecy policies. And if AB 1955 goes into effect, it would ban these districts from notifying parents about their children's non-biological gender identity, or from changing school records that accommodate that identity that are hidden from parents. My co-host, Pastor George Rosca, is off this week, but here to talk about this ominous trend and more is today's guest, Erika Sanzi from Parents Defending Education. PDE is a national grassroots organization working to reclaim our schools from activists imposing harmful agendas. Through network and coalition building, investigative reporting, litigation, and engagement at local, state, and national policies, PDE is fighting indoctrination in the classroom and promoting the restoration of a healthy, non-political education for our kids, something that we all desire greatly. My guest, Erika Sanzi, is the Director of Outreach at Parents Defending Education, of which Protect Our Kids is a proud partner. Erika is a former educator herself, an elected school board member, and officially and currently serves on the board of advisors for the Boys Initiative. She is also the mother of 3 teenage sons. Erika, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to talking with you.
It's so good to have you here. So, Erika, living here in California, we feel like we're at the epicenter of the war against parents' rights. I've just outlined the latest legislation coming from our state house. But this war has broad tentacles, doesn't it? It's not just limited to the coastal states.
No, this has really metastasized. I think of it as a hydra with like a head here, and then there's just, there's just heads going off in every direction. And it could be worse because I suppose you in Oregon and Washington could compete for, who is the most insane and crazy right now. But I live also in a place where we have the same policies in almost all of our school districts, kind of passed under the cover of night, I think in 2016. Parents weren't really aware of it. And we see, we call them parental exclusion policies. I know that you had used a different framing. And really what it is this idea that the school can keep information, withhold information from parents about their own children deliberately, which clearly brings up ethical questions as well as legal questions. Again, this idea that a child would be going by a different name at school, using different pronouns at school, self-identifying into different bathrooms and locker rooms and, hotel rooms on overnight field trips, referring to themselves as something other than their natal sex, and that the school would accommodate and facilitate this with no consent or notification of parents is, it really is dangerous. And I think that people underestimate sort of the wreckage that this leaves in its wake when you fast forward a few years.
Now, Erika, you were recently interviewed for an article in the Daily Mail, which is a publication out of England. How did that come about, and what was the subject of that reporting?
So we do a lot of filing of public records requests, and sometimes we do them where we'll just try to figure out what or get a sense of what's going on in one particular state. So we did that in New Mexico, and we got back some results. And so we wrote up short little reports about 7 districts in New Mexico, all that had these parental exclusion policies, which means that it said in writing that staff was either encouraged or required to withhold information from parents about their child's gender identity at school and the accommodations being provided. And so with our organization is once we put together, a little package of information, we look to see who in the media might be interested in covering it. And in this case, the Daily Mail picked up the New Mexico batch of reports. Which again, and it was great because we don't have a ton of stuff in New Mexico, whereas in some, New York and California and Massachusetts and Virginia, we feel like we have tons. And what they report and what we found is practically a carbon copy of what we are finding, almost every time we ask questions and pull together information from different states around the country.
So I want to explore this a little bit more because very often when we do a conference or we're invited to a speaking engagement and we talk about the harms to their kids in the public schools, mainly sex and gender theory, critical theory doctrine, critical race theory, queer theory, social emotional learning, the whole ambit of destruction policies now that are part and parcel of what's going on in the K through 12 public school system. What we often hear from parents in our audience is, well, yeah, we've heard about this. It's really terrible, but it's not happening in my school. They haven't personally heard about that. So, Erika, is that parental confidence that it's not happening in their school justified?
Definitely very misplaced. And I can speak to this from a personal experience. So I was on my school board from 2010 to 2012. So at that time, I was very, dialed into what was going on. But even after that, I considered myself to be pretty informed about the schools. At the time, I had my kids, they attended the middle school in our district. I felt like I knew stuff, and I would be near, not at the top, but near the top of people in terms of informed about the schools. And in 2016, a policy in our district passed, and I only really remembered it being related to bathrooms, and I still remember I hadn't really thought it through, and so the compassionate side of me felt like this kind of made sense or was a good thing. I was not well informed at all on this topic. And fast forward to probably, I don't know, maybe 2020, and I discover that this policy that I either had no opinion on or was leaning positive on, in that policy, it included language that stated that the school staff were not to inform parents of the child's decision to essentially identify as someone else during the school day, and that student would be put on a gender support plan, and that they would be using, unbeknownst to the parents, different restrooms, locker rooms, facilities, etc., and essentially living a double life. If I had known, because I did a public mea culpa where I sort of wrote about how this is what I thought it was, this is what I now know it is, this is kind of how I went from feeling like this seemed like a nice thing to do to realizing how wrong this was. And so I think unless people live, there are some states in the Sun Belt where we really do not see much of this. We go looking, we put our feelers out, we try to pull up policies. And so there are some places that are kind of still holding hard and fast to not implementing these policies. But that is a small piece of the country. Because normally what's happening is activist organizations, many of which used to be dedicated to, gay marriage, for example, but when they accomplished their goal, they needed something else to do, and they shifted to this gender stuff. And one of the many things they do is they draft template language that they want K-12 schools to use in their policies, in their curriculum, in their, after school clubs, et cetera. And so what we find is that template language, either coming from these activist organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, like the Trevor Project, like GLSEN, or it goes from the activist group to the National School Board Association, who then disseminates it to the state school board associations, who then disseminate it to the districts, and the districts just copy and paste that language and they put it in their policy manuals. So the language is almost identical all the time. And often it's a job that gets delegated, right? So somebody in the school is now in charge of, we got to update this gender policy. And a lot of the people working in the district don't even know what their policies say. We expose them. Sometimes we'll get like denials and then we'll show them and then they'll, oh, we need to get back to you, because I think there's a lot of even I don't think staff fully understands. I for sure know that the administrative assistants who handle public records requests, they're often the most shocked and appalled when they're reading the stuff that they're sending back to us. And then you have the people that are sort of kind of very ideological who work in the district who love it.
So, Erika, maybe for that parent out there who's listening to this and still thinking, well, that may be true, but still I haven't seen any evidence. I've not heard anything from my own kids that this is happening in our school, maybe a middle school and, central Illinois someplace. You at Parents Defending Education have marshaled a fairly large database, and where you've collected direct evidence from FOIA requests around the country to, support your allegations that this is a nationwide phenomena. Can you share with our audience a little bit more about the process of how this evidence is collected and how large the database is, what you found?
Sure. And we started this, I would say, at least 2 years ago. So, the list, I still remember when the number of students affected was 3 million, and now our number of students affected is 11.5 million. And this is all, we only document policies that we have seen in writing, with our own eyes. It can't just be that a parent reaches out and says, well, this is what's happening at my school. We have to be able to corroborate and vet it. And the way that we come across this actually varies. In many, many school districts around the country, this information is available online. It's public. So if you were to just if you went into sometimes it's in the student policy or the student handbook. Sometimes it's called a policy manual, but often if you just kind of do a search about the word gender and discrimination, because often the way that they justify these policies is on anti-discrimination grounds. Also, you'll hear a lot about privacy. Those seem to be the two places where we hear them sort of justifying these parental exclusion policies. So much of what we have is because we just kind of go through districts and we can get it easily online because it's public. Other places either don't have it public and never have, or maybe it was, and as the sunlight started creeping in, they've begun taking things down. So sometimes we get them through public records requests where somebody on my team, I'm not really sure exactly what he writes in the requests, but it's related to wanting to see their gender policies, anything related to gender, transgender students, gender support plans, and policies related to like whether or not parents can be notified. And so, for example, the New Mexico batch that we just published, that all came from us submitting public records requests to get our eyes on the policies.
Now, we have copies of public records requests on our website at Protect Our Kids. I'm sure you do too for parents who want to tackle this job themselves. Have you found any resistance on the schools that you've queried through these requests to providing the information requested?
Oh, yeah. We run into this all the time.
Didn't mean to be a rhetorical question.
Right. I mean, it's interesting. Every once in a while, it's just easy, right? You send something in, they send something back. But often we run into a few different things. One is we run into them claiming they have no records responsive to our request, and we know that can't be true. Other times, the fee that they want to charge us is so exorbitant. Um, like I know we've been quoted $37,000. I don't really remember what our highest ones are. And every once in a while, it's kind of like it's in our budget to every once in a while get a large request like that, a fee where they're sure that we're going to go away. And we just say, okay, yep, check's in the mail. We're going to move forward because we want to be sure that they understand that this idea that they're going to freeze us out with cost is not going to be, it's not going to be 100%, right? Which means like, if you end up being the one district we decide to pay the bill for that, that quarter or that whatever. And the other thing that we run into a lot is that the request is too broad. So we end up having to narrow the scope of the request. I know that I just recently was writing something up and I don't remember the details, but we finally got something back, but it's been well over a year since we put the request in. So that's the other thing is we see a lot of like dragging of their feet. That's why just a bit of advice is that if a group or even a family wants to submit these requests, this is a good job for the person who is really organized in like with administrative tasks, because you send it in and then based on state law, when do they have to get back to you by? Like you have to keep track so that you can keep bugging them so that on the date that you're supposed to have gotten something back, if you don't, you remember to reach back out to them. I am a terrible person for this task because I just have very poor sort of like organizational administrative skills. So it's the kind of thing that's perfect. Like if between my marriage, my husband would have to be the one that would do this. And at PDE, the people that do our FOIAs are the people that are really excellent at organizing files and keeping track of things and knowing, okay, they have 10 more days. I should hear from them in 4 days. They have 30 days and they really keep track of. Because the other thing is I think that the districts often hope you're just going to forget and go away.
You make this information available to people on your website. So if a parent in Nebraska, their child is going to a certain high school and they want to see if PDE has found information from that high school, they can do a search on your website and find it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have something called an indoctrination map on our homepage, and that's actually sort of my main responsibility with our organization. And so anything that we have exposed, which means that we either somebody sent us something, so we got a tip from a parent, sometimes it's somebody on staff, sometimes it's something that we saw on social media, sometimes it's like a news clip. So any way that we get information that we want to look into this place for some reason. And then if we end up getting, again, sometimes it's just looking at their website and everything's right there. You can see the crazy, curriculum right there. Other times it requires having to reach out to the district. That's all up on our website. It goes by, you can search by state. You can also, I think, search by district. You can also search by issue, I think. And it'll have all of our primary sources. So when we write up an incident, so let's just say a school had a playground night that was limited to basically all families were invited except for white families. Which is a trend. We see these barbecues, dances, playground nights that are for families of color. The idea is that, they have shared experiences, and so they all need to be together, and whatever good intentions people may have, number one, it's illegal to do that. And number two, it's just incredibly divisive, and I think that it just leads to a bad place. So anyway, that would be something that we would show you the flyer. We would show you the Facebook post. We would show you everything we had about the incident. We actually do not editorialize in our write-ups at all. It's very much like, this is the school, this is the date, here's what happened, and here is all the evidence. And it's not because we don't have an opinion on it. It sort of feels like I want people to read it and then say, huh, I think that's weird, or wow, I think that's great, or this is terrible. But I just want them to come to their own conclusions based on the evidence that we put up there, and it is all available for the public. We also do occasionally, if something's going on at a school and a parent needs help, they want to file public records requests, but they need help. Maybe they don't want their name on it for whatever reason, often fear of retaliation. We have also filed requests on behalf of parents who have reached out to us.
And this pertains to another question I have. If parents have already done the work and they've done their own FOIA requests and received information, do you have a way to accept what these parents have discovered and include that on your database as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, one way is to just email me, which is Erika with a K at defendinged.org. But they can also go to our website, and we have like an info account where you can, which is more like our generic inbox, and they can send it that way too. But the easiest way would be to find me through you guys, I think, and then they don't get that auto reply. And then I can either take care of it myself or pass it on to my team. And again, occasionally people are disappointed because they might send us something that they think is so awful or so whatever, and it doesn't necessarily reach our threshold. That especially happens when it's really more of like if it's not documentation, or if it's more, my son had a meeting with the principal and she said this and he said this. It's like we can't really do anything with that. We have to have primary source evidence. But yes, when parents have that, we absolutely do write it up.
So we've been talking in this discussion a lot about sort of the mechanics of these requests and how widespread these parental exclusion policies or secrecy policies are. But we should probably talk a little bit about what they're actually teaching, how they're actually grooming kids. And this article in the Daily Mail does a little bit of that. This is written by a gentleman named James Rennell. It was published on June the 7th. So you can go to that article. It's called The Sunbelt Cities, Where Teachers Don't Tell Parents Their Own Kids Are Changing Sex at School. And they show examples of tools that schools are using to groom kids, the genderbread person, the gender unicorn person, that teaches them that your identity is completely fluid, it's completely subjective, it's whatever you think it is, and if you happen to think you're not your biological gender, well, the school's going to step in and start supporting you. And we actually have a video that comes from an organization called Amaze. It's very common. This is used throughout the country to start grooming very young children. And I think it's probably good that we play that video. It was also included in the Daily Mail article that you were interviewed in, Erika. So why don't we play that?
All right, folks, here we go. A romaine and kale salad with avocado, cucumber, shishito peppers, and 4 kinds of cheese. Sprinkled in balsamic straight from Italy.
Wow. In my day, salads only had 2 ingredients. A rock-hard wedge of iceberg lettuce and a stinky old dried-up tomato.
Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to eat fast. Alex is stopping by in a few minutes to work on our robotics project.
Alex, is that the girl with that weird dog or the boy with the hat with the wings that flap?
No, Uncle Jay. This is Alex.
Oh, okay. I remember. A very nice young... Come to think of it, well, is Alex a boy or a girl?
Actually, Alex doesn't define themselves as boy or girl.
What else is there?
Back in your day, most people understood the world in terms of just boys and girls. But now, we know gender is more complex than that.
Wait, aren't we just talking about whether you're born with a or a hee?
When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way, but the sex listed on your birth certificate may not necessarily match your gender identity.
Gender identity is a person's inner experience of who they are in terms of gender, their deep personal sense of being male, female, a blend of both, or neither.
And while many people have a gender identity that's the same as their assigned birth sex of female or male, that's not always the case, because gender exists on a spectrum. Like transgender, which means a person whose gender identity is not consistent with their assigned birth sex. Non-binary, which means a person whose identity doesn't fall in the category of either male or female. and genderqueer or gender fluid, which means a person who does not identify themselves as having a specific gender at all.
Does gender identity have to do with being straight or gay?
Actually, no. Gender identity has to do with the way you feel about yourself, while sexual orientation is based on the way you feel toward others, the people you may or may not be attracted to.
You know, I really like Alex, and I can tell they're a good friend to you. But I'm still pretty confused about all of this.
That's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone to respect them. To start, try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender, and use the name and pronouns that they ask you to. Above all, be a friend or ally for people of all gender identities.
That's right, Mom. Oh, Alex is here. Come on in.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, hey, Alex. Care for some salad? The balsamic's right from Italy, you know.
So imagine that you've got a 7 or 8 year old son or daughter taking grammar in your local elementary school. And this is the kind of material that is being presented to them by an authority figure in the form of a teacher. And this is just one example of a host of similar kinds of materials that are spread across the curriculum. In many states, by law, these curriculums are required. In California, where POK is situated, a course in ethnic studies, and sex and gender theory in the form of comprehensive sexuality education is required for middle school and high school graduation. So parents are under an illusion if they think that this kind of stuff that their children are not being exposed to this kind of material. And Erika, I don't know how familiar you are with these studies now that have recently started to come out en masse on the medical evidence against what is called gender affirming care. Of course, there's a famous Cass report that was recently released. This is a 4-year study, a 388-page report from the Medical Association in England, basically disparaging the whole idea of gender-affirming care for minors. There have been a number of doctors and psychiatrists from WPATH, which is the World Psychological Association for Transgender Health, that have come out against this. There have been many European countries, mostly in Northern Europe, that have completely reversed their policies. I guess my question for you is any of this evidence prevailing upon school districts? Are you starting to see maybe some pause in implementing these parental exclusion policies? Or is it still going full speed ahead despite the increasing medical evidence against these policies?
So I'm cautiously optimistic in the sense that I think that finally information is beginning to break through. So Europe is way ahead of us on this. You know, the UK, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, as they've really been pulling back based on what the evidence is telling them. We have right now just a lot of ideologues in power that are completely have pledged allegiance to this gender ideology. I actually don't quite understand it. Smart people who were kind of like moderate on some things for a long time have suddenly just like gone, they're silent on this issue. So like you take like, I don't know, like there's just people in the Senate or in the House that if you injected them with truth serum, I know that they don't think that girls should be having to race against boys. I know that they don't think that males should be changing in locker rooms with girls, but yet it's like they just don't say anything. And so the executive branch, because the Biden administration is full steam ahead on this, so is the Department of Education. And it's like either they know that they're saying things they don't believe, or they have been completely brainwashed about this idea of inclusion that they think that they're doing the right thing. I am. So here's where I am cautiously optimistic. There are a lot of lifelong Democrats, lifelong liberals, people who used to be really like on board with gender affirming care, even, who have totally become educated and said, this is really wrong. This is really dangerous. There's even gender clinicians who are transgender themselves speaking out and saying any withholding of information from parents is absolutely wrong. And they think it's wrong ethically, and they think it's very dangerous for kids because they acknowledge that there's usually comorbidities involved. So you have a child who's struggling with a gender issue for whatever reason, but also has mental health problems, right? And that they're clinging, I think, to this idea, maybe my problem is that I'm really, you know, that I don't have the right gender identification right now. And if I just change that, all of these other problems will go away. Well, that never happens. In fact, most of the time, those problems are exacerbated. So schools are still full steam ahead from what I can tell. On the Title IX rewrite, which for people, if they don't know, is just that this 52-year-old law that came into being to protect girls and women and give them opportunities. It actually just says you can't discriminate on the basis of sex in educational institutions that receive federal money. But back in the 70s, that discrimination was generally something that the girls and the women were dealing with. So now, the Biden administration's Title IX rewrite is looking to redefine the word sex to include gender identification. So, and that it would basically unravel the entire law. The whole basis for the law then unravels because it was to give the girls their own sports divisions. It was to guarantee them access to single-sex spaces. And when you include gender identity and you say that people can self-identify into any facilities they want or into any, swimming competition, track competition they want, what you've done is you've completely gutted and destroyed the law. So that's another strange thing going on. And I feel like we've seen quite a few state education chiefs or commissioners, they go by different names, who've come out and said, like, we're not going along with this, absolutely not. PDE is part of one lawsuit. I believe there have been 6 lawsuits filed against this rewrite of Title IX. So that's encouraging. What is not encouraging is that it really does seem like blue states are full steam ahead, red states are pushing back. People like me in a blue state just would give anything for their governor to say this is wrong, and instead the governor kind of seems like he's like just on board the gender train. But I feel right now that we're in a better place than we were 2 years ago in terms of awareness, in terms of people finding the courage to speak out, in terms of athletes finding the courage to speak out, coaches, parents. The problem is that the media has like a blackout on this. And that is why people are so unaware. For example, I live in this tiny little state of Rhode Island. We have 2 lawsuits that have been filed against gender clinicians in my tiny little state. Both by people who feel that they were misled or couldn't consent as minors when they made these decisions to remove body parts and take testosterone and puberty blockers and all that. And they're suing, I think they're suing this guy, Jason Rafferty, who I think he wrote the standards for the American Academy of Pediatrics, and also a gender clinician at Brown. That would be in a tiny state to have 2 lawsuits like that. That should be a big story in the media. It hasn't had any coverage. I can think of one radio guy that has talked about it, but other than that, it's nowhere. So part of the reason why people think it's not happening is because the media is negligent and they are not covering it. And I'm not even saying that the media has to come out and opine. I'm saying that they need to report on what's actually happening, and they're not doing that.
Arguably, their lack of reporting is deliberate. This is a policy among the major mainstream media channels that we're gonna squelch this news. So unless you're watching, Fox News or conservative talk radio or listening to programs like this one or PDE, you're simply not going to hear about this. But Erika, in the last remaining minutes that we have, there's also some good news maybe you can highlight upon parents and parent groups filing their own lawsuits across the country to challenge these parental exclusion or secrecy policies on constitutional grounds.
Yeah, I don't know the details, but I certainly do know that there have been lawsuits filed by parent groups. And in some cases, there's lawsuits where like people have come together to file together. So it may be a parent group and also another organization. And that is, I hate to say that going to court is a necessity because it's expensive and it's hard and I just feel like it's a massive commitment and most people probably don't want to do it, but it does seem to be one of the only ways to fight back against this because, the person goes to their pediatrician and 9 times out of 10, the pediatrician is on board with all the gender ideology stuff. The parent reaches out to a social worker or a therapist 9 times out of 10, they're also on board with it. That they reach out to the school. This is something that I've heard many times is they reach out to the school. They'll say, my daughter had never had a gender issue in her entire life. She was depressed. She went to a outpatient, group, in like a, what am I trying to say right now? In like a hospital that deals with psychiatric issues. And they'll say she came home, adopted the issues that all the girls in the group had, and now she's saying that she wants to change her gender. And when I talk to the school about it, they are like, oh, well, then she should change her gender. Like, you got to go along with it, Mom. So parents are feeling like the door is being sort of slammed in their face when they go to the helpers, the people who they usually thought were of as helpers. And so, unfortunately, finding lawyers has now become like one of the only ways I think that they feel that they can stand up for themselves, stand up for their children, and make positive change for those coming after them.
And there is some good news out there. There are specific judges who are sensible across the country who recognize the danger to parental constitutional rights and are taking bold stands against these parental secrecy policies. And I'll just give you one example before we close here. This was the Escondido School District, which is in the San Diego area, which you're familiar with, Erika. And they had one of these parental secrecy policies. Parents, a group of parents filed a lawsuit against it, asking for an injunction against these policies. And federal district judge Roger Benitez ruled for the parents, giving them an injunction until a full trial can happen. And in his concluding remarks about these parental secrecy policies, here's what he wrote. The school's policy is a trifecta of harm. It harms the child who needs parental guidance and possibly mental health intervention to determine if the incongruence is organic or whether it is the result of bullying, peer pressure, or a fleeting impulse. It harms the parents by depriving them of the long-recognized 14th Amendment right to care, guide, and make healthcare decisions for their children. And finally, it harms plaintiffs who are compelled to violate the parents' rights by forcing plaintiffs to conceal information they feel is critical for the welfare of their children, violating plaintiffs' religious beliefs. That's District Judge Roger Benitez. So there is some good news here. So, Erika, in closing, first of all, how can we reach you? How can people find you if they want more information on what we've discussed today? And any concluding remarks that you have?
Well, you can find us. Our organization is Parents Defending Education. Our website is defendinged.org. And you can reach out to us through that. We have a ton of resources up there as well that people may find helpful. As I said earlier, my email is Erika, ERIKA, @defendinged.org. That's the quickest way to get straight to me. We also have accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, which are also Defending Ed. No, I mean, I guess my concluding remark, one thing that we hear a lot from people who do not have sympathy for this idea of parental rights or parental notification is they'll say, well, you obviously have a bad relationship with your child if they're keeping secrets from you, which is obviously, it's an attempt to, dismiss and diminish the parent, but it's also ridiculous. When we think about adolescence, the idea that adolescents would not keep secrets from their parents, I'm not saying that they all do it. I'm simply saying whether it used to be that the girls were going in and putting makeup on in the school bathroom or changing into the outfit they really wanted to wear when they got to school, or have a boyfriend, but they're not allowed to have a boyfriend, so it's a secret. So this idea that only a bad parent would have the experience of a child, wanting to change their gender or going behind the backs of the parents to do it at school, especially when at school it is celebrated, it is cheerleaded, it is taught, it is oftentimes pushed, certainly promoted. Parents just need to, if they hear that comment, they just need to immediately say to themselves, that is ridiculous. You don't let somebody make you feel like you don't love your kids don't love you, you're not a good parent. If you were a good parent, they would tell you. That's just absurd. And the hundreds and thousands of parents out there that are struggling with this situation in their homes, and they'll tell you that it really can destroy a family. These were people who they loved their children, had great relationships with their children, and oftentimes out of the blue, suddenly this gendered subject comes up, and it is very painful. And don't let someone telling you that if your kid really loved you, trust you, if you were a good parent, they wouldn't hide anything from you. That's just absurd, and it's an absurd assertion. I hear it constantly, and I really want people to just immediately know to shut that down.
That's well said, and I would like to underscore those remarks. We're going to have to leave it there for today, but I want to thank our guest, Erika Sanzi, for joining us from Parents Defending Education. Please visit their website and take advantage of the many resources that they have to help parents with kids in the public school system. And we look forward to being with you next time on Say What?